Good morning and welcome to Integrative Preparedness. How are you all today? I want to talk for a few minutes about surviving a mass shooting, an active shooter. This is in the wake of the mass shooting up in Lewiston, Maine. I put up a couple about that, but this I'm going to concentrate. I want to share a few things with you that might help you if you ever unfortunately find yourself in that position, might help you survive it and get home alive. If you're new here, just a word about me. If you say, well, why is this guy talking about this? I taught active shooter response in a major hospital system for almost 13 years. Before that, I was a police officer and a deputy sheriff. I worked high activity districts while I was in uniform, which means the hood, and have quite a bit of an experience with violent encounters. After my time in uniform, I did time in fugitive apprehension and undercover narcotics and organized crime. So and then I've taught combatives, self-defense, and martial arts for almost 50 years. So that's just a short on me as to why I might be talking about this. Most people are familiar with the three basic responses that are suggested in an active shooter situation. If you work someplace that has active shooter training, you've heard this, or you may have heard it on the news, and you'll hear it again now as this comes out, and there will be all sorts of people repeating this, and it's a good place to start, and I'll tell you what that is, but that's not where we're going to end. And those three things are run, hide, and fight. Okay, now I want to interject a couple of things here. The purpose of this channel, and specifically the purpose of this video, is to educate. It's not to get views, not to get clicks, not to try to up the standing of the video in the algorithm of YouTube. The reason that I say that is that I often, when I make videos like this, I often have to delete comments. Okay, let me put it this way. I very often don't put these kinds of videos on YouTube, reserving them instead for the Patreon channel, simply because when I put up certain types of videos, and this being one, another being guns, whatever, it just seems to attract many people into the comment section that want to express an opinion and they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, they might think they do, maybe they mean well, but they come on expressing opinions that are simply wrong, and as a result will mislead other people who read the comments. And that's why I will take them off, because the purpose here is not to drive the numbers, but to educate. I'm an educator. I've been teaching this stuff for most of my life, and if someone comes on and includes something that will mislead others, I will take that off, because this isn't a discussion board. This is my classroom, okay, if you want to put it that way. The other thing is that when I taught, and this is common throughout the industry, when I taught active shooter response, I was limited in what I could tell people. There was a certain, there was a criteria that was set mainly by the administration of the organization and its lawyers. And a lot of that, because as you can imagine, was there because of perceived liability. Okay, and so when I talked to people, I would share with them. I would say, here's what the system wants me to tell you, and now I will tell you more from me and my experience. And these are the important things. There were some important things from the previous. These are things that will really get you home, okay? And I even shared my opinions with the CEO, and although they couldn't agree with me officially, they understood what I was doing. So take that into consideration, that if you have been through one of these programs, there is so much more to it than that. Okay, now let's get started. With the run, hide, and fight. Yes, if you can run, here again, the average person becomes aware of an active shooter in kind of a haze, kind of a confusion. You might hear some pops. People don't really know, if you haven't heard gunfire in person, they don't really know what gunfire sounds like. And then it can sound different depending on whether it's a pistol, a rifle, or whatever. But it's confusing to most people. And depending on what situation you're in, if you're in a grocery store with open areas, if you're in a bowling alley like this was, in Lewiston apparently, okay, the information's still coming out. You can imagine the amount of noise that's coming in a bowling alley. You've been in a bowling alley lately, it's all, I mean, the balls, the pins hitting, the music playing, everything like that. And then all of a sudden you hear, these pop, 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 pops. And a lot of times it doesn't immediately register with people as to what that might be. And then pretty soon they start seeing, it doesn't take long, but they start seeing people running and behaving, with excitement. And I don't mean a good excitement. And maybe then they see people getting shot. So they're coming into this through a haze of confusion. Now, if you're in another situation like say a hospital or an office building or a school, when you hear it, it can be difficult to know where it's coming from. Okay. Because of the noise as it bounces off of the concrete walls and the tile floors and everything like that, you're not really sure where it's coming from. So the idea to immediately run, I'm going to back that up, and I'm going to say the first thing to do is think. Okay, think. Now, in a situation like the bowling alley, depending on where people were, it's probably a mad, people might have ducked down and hid behind, things. If he was already inside, people may be running for the doorways. If there's something in an office building, very often you might find so many people running toward the doorway that it can become a bottleneck. But that, you just have to decide what you're going to do for your situation. But the first thing, before you run, think. Try to determine where it's coming from, because if you don't know where it's coming from, like I say, in an office building, a hospital, a school, because of the sound reverberating, bouncing off of different surfaces, you may run right into the shooter thinking you're running away. So the first thing, think, and then get down. Okay, get down on, into a squat. You're going to make yourself, in case that shooter comes around a corner, you're going to make yourself a smaller target, but then also not an immediately recognizable target, because he is expecting, and it's usually a he, but it could be a she, he is expecting people to be standing. And so as he's clearing a corner, he's looking for standing targets. Well, if you're crouched down, that's going to be different. Now try to, get yourself in backed up to a wall. Get yourself into a corner somewhere as you determine where you want to run. No matter where you are, and if you're in a situation where you have training provided from your employer or whatever, you'll probably have drills that they'll suggest, and they'll go through kind of a program like, does everybody know where the closest exit is to where you are? Well, you should know where the closest exit is no matter where you are in the building. Keep that in the back of your mind. That's your escape route. That's your route home. That's your route to the rest of your life. Do you know where different elevators and stairwells lead to, and what exits they empty out into? In the case of multi-level buildings, very often there will be stairwells that, as you and for the most part, active shooters aren't looking for people in stairwells. They're going down hallways into offices and things like that. There will be stairwells that go all the way down and maybe exit onto a loading dock or someplace not the main entrance and exit. And so those are the things you want to know. Make sure that as you run, You're keep being mindful of things that are going on around you. As you pass people, let them know, hey, I think there's an active shooter, or I think, whatever. And get yourself out of there as quickly as possible. If you find, there's a lot more that goes into this. I can't do everything in a short video, but just keep those things in mind. How do you get out and get out? If you're running out, I'll put this in right now. If you're running out, expect a police response. Now, understand that the police are not going to know who the bad guy is. So if you're running out of the building and the police are showing up, get your hands up so that you're trying to show that you're not a threat to them, and then listen. Listen to what they say. If they tell you to get down, and they may not be real nice about it, they may be screaming, get down, get down, get down, while they're aiming at you. Just do it. Don't take it personally. They don't know who the bad guy is. They're going through a process now of identifying. And as they do that, certain ones will pass by you, certain ones will secure you, meaning taking you off somewhere and now starting an interview process of finding out what information you have that can help them as the situation develops. Okay, that's the basics of running. I could do another half hour on that. Hiding. If you can't run, you gotta hide. Here's another thing of being familiar with your environment, being familiar with your building. Go someplace, hopefully, that you can barricade the door. Okay, and you should know. Now, many rooms have locks on them. Many rooms don't, but most rooms can be secured. They can be barricaded from the inside. Know those methods of barricading. And I won't take the time of going through it all here. I'm sure there's plenty of videos on YouTube that will explain that to you. But know that, and then once you get in there, text 911. I should have said that in the beginning, but you don't want to give away your location. So in many cases, you can text 911 without calling it, okay? Because a voice coming over the phone on you is going, if the shooter's close, they're going to go, oh, there's somebody in there, okay? So text 911 or call quietly if you can. Do not jeopardize yourself by remaining online to answer the questions of the dispatcher. Now, if you can, that's great, because they need that information. And I'll get some people, that will disagree with me on that. I don't care. Don't jeopardize yourself, because if you're talking on a phone, if you've barricaded yourself in a room, barricade yourself in, shut off the lights, turn off all sounds, and be quiet. Okay. Your decision is, you want to be the hero or do you want to be a survivor? Okay, and I'm not saying either one of those is right or wrong, but it's your decision to do. And so stay hidden, lights off, phones off, no talking, until you hear noises that sound like the police clearing the building, and as they come by and knock on every door. And you'll hear something such as, police, is anybody in there? Well, is it the police or is it the shooter? Okay, you don't know. And a lot of this will have to do with how long it has taken. I mean, if you hear this within a few minutes, chances are police aren't clearing the entire building yet. But you don't know. There's no way to know. If it's 25 minutes later, the chances of it being police are a lot better. What you can do is you can call. You can call 911 again and say, I have somebody outside the door saying they're the police. If they really are, would you tell them to say such and such, And anyway, or you can ask them to, I've heard people say, ask them to pass their credentials underneath the door. Well, come on. Anyway, there's ways to do that. So hide. The last thing is fight. If you can't run, if you can't get away, and if you can't hide, you do have to fight. And here's where I want to take something a little bit different tack than most people are allowed to teach in their active shooter response classes. The person who usually gets home is the person who is determined to get home. You go into an animalistic state while still maintaining your ability to think rationally. Okay? You'll be surprised what happens to your thinking when you are in a real emergency situation if you haven't been in one. Some people freeze. Some people think more clearly. It really does tend to focus some people. And the response of those people is going to be very, very different. But I'll just throw in a couple of things here that I can say more plainly on here than I did when I was at my corporate job. And that is that these things usually happen in soft targets, and everybody knows that. As far as I'm concerned, these places, there should be no place to where guns are prohibited, which means there is no place to where your right to defend yourself has been taken away from you by administrators and lawyers who feel that you getting killed is a better option as far as liability than allowing employees or visitors or whatever to carry their own protection while in their building. Will this ever be fixed? I don't know. I mean, there's just too many people making the laws and sitting in conference rooms. Most of these policies are developed by people who know nothing about guns, are afraid of guns, who think that guns are the problem, not the people. And so they make these decisions that others have to live and die by. So anyway, here's a couple of things that I want to say. Let me go back. Before I get to that, I want to go back to one thing that I meant to put in and I didn't. And that is, if you are running, don't run close to a wall. Okay. Bullets can skip off of walls. And it actually is something that we trained on, how to skip bullets, how to skip rounds under cars, off walls, everything like that. Stay out in the middle of the hallway, because a moving target is harder to hit than a stationary target. And you're just wanting to increase your odds, right? And the farther away you are from a wall, it does a couple of things. First off, if you're close to a wall, it gives the shooter a little bit more of a relational space to shoot at. And even if they're off and they hit the wall, it could skip right into you. Now, the whole purpose on this, and many people will be surprised on this, is you might take a hit or two. Okay, you might get shot. But the thing is, not every shot is fatal. And plenty of people have been shot and been able to carry on and do things. In your case, hopefully getting out of the building until you can get out to the police, and then they can secure you and get you to medical, which is always going to be behind their lines, and they can get at you and hopefully bring you through. So that's the thing. When you're running, run fast, and stay away from the walls. Okay, so now back to fighting. In my opinion, nobody has a right to tell you can't defend yourself. Now, these institutions will say, well, we didn't say they can't defend themselves. After all, they can throw a stapler at him. They can throw pencils at him. And this is actually what they tell these people. Look around you in your office. Look at all the things that could be used as a weapon. Could your mobile phone be used as a weapon? Could you pick up your printer and throw it? What a bunch of horse hockey. This is, again, the kind of stuff that is made up by people sitting around a conference table who don't know what in the hell they're talking about. Of course, you know as well as I do that the best defense against a gun is another gun. Okay. Now, most people who work at these places are prevented from carrying in their workplace or when you're visiting somebody, right? Okay. Here's where I'm going to start separating from the official line. And that is, you are the one who has to decide whether their policy or your safety is more important. As simple as that. Now, if you're working a place, now when you're visiting, I mean, I don't pay attention to these signs. I carry, right? And I carry a gun of sufficient size and caliber to, let me just put it that way, sufficient size and caliber. If you're working someplace, for instance, the hospital that I worked at, okay? Or if you work in any environment, you may not be able to carry a full size, right? In very case, I mean, you go to hospitals, all the nurses, they're dressed in scrubs, right? Yeah. And so it makes it more difficult. And I had a conversation with, and I said this on a previous video, I had a conversation with the CEO of the hospital one time, and I told him how ridiculous their no firearms policy was and how it actually endangered people rather than helped. And he didn't really understand. He was kind of a liberal guy, and although he listened to me because we knew each other personally as well as professionally, he listened to me. But I told him, I said, you know, man, there are more guns in this hospital than you would imagine. And that simply means that, hey, many people say, I don't care what your policy is, my life and getting home to my kids is more important than your stupid policy. And if you want to fire me for it, go ahead, I'll get another job. And so I told him that there's more guns in this place than you can imagine. And he just kind of said, yeah, I figured so, or yeah, I know, or something like that. And I said, you know, these are the people that if anything happens are going to, you know, hopefully some of them will step up and actually be the resistance. These people who you've said that if you got a gun on them, you're going to fire them. These are going to be the ones who step up and stop it if it ever happens, right? So, you know, and here again, most active shooter situations end when on first contact with resistance. When the shooter is first met with some kind of resistance. That's not always armed resistance, believe it or not. And it's not always law enforcement resistance. Sometimes it's an armed citizen. Sometimes it's an unarmed citizen. It's simply a matter of resistance. Most, and not all, but most active shooters do not expect to survive the shooting situation. That's why many of them die at their own hand, or many of them, as soon as the police show up, you know, they pop themselves, or they are shot by police, or a citizen, whatever. That's what brings most of them to a conclusion. Now, this Lewiston situation is different in that he obviously planned this and wants to escape. He wants to survive it, but that most situations aren't like that. So it's up to you to decide whether or not you are going to avail yourself of carrying something that would help you in this. Okay, a fancy way of saying carrying a gun. I should have just said that. Here, I will go way afield, and this is going to shock some people who have followed me for a long time, who know that I am not a fan of 9mm or below, and I consider them to be sub-effective rounds. Okay, here's where I'm going to get people on here and say, no, the 9mm is everything you need and it's the best gun in the world. And it's usually from somebody who's never been in these situations. They don't know. They got it from a gun magazine, or else they have a 9mm. And because most people do, because most people have bought guns not knowing much, and they've always heard get a 9mm. Okay. Interesting. It's a round that was made popular by the fact that it was a NATO designated round, and secondly by hood rats. Okay, by the gangsters. Get my 9, you know, and so people think that that's it. A 9mm, anything underneath, a 380, a 22, a 38, are not as effective as the larger calibers. Simple as that. There is no argument for that. So anybody, don't anybody come on and argue your 9mm, because I'm about to tell you something that you might be happy with. And that is that it's easier to carry something of a smaller caliber if you're trying to hide it in your workplace. Okay, if it's against policy, it's easier to hide a very small 9mm. It's easier to hide a 380. It's easier to hide a 22. If you're going to go with a 22, I would suggest it be a 22 Magnum. But, you know, whatever. This falls under the category of it's better than nothing. And it is better than nothing. Now, when I talk about selecting a handgun, and I'm going to be making one in within the next couple of weeks about choosing a handgun for beginners. That better than nothing doesn't apply. And that's the argument that I get very often from the 9mm people. Well, it's better than nothing. Well, I don't eat dog food instead of steak because it's better than nothing. You see, that's a stupid argument. If you can carry something more effective and you don't, you've made a poor decision. Okay, but if the case is concealability, now you're getting down into the smaller calibers. And if a 9mm, a 380, a 25, a 22, yeah, it's going to be better than nothing. It's going to be better than nothing if for no more reason that even if the guy sees you shooting at him, it might make him have a moment of pause, which will help. And you might hit him, and it probably won't take him down, but it might hurt to the point to where he thinks, oh my gosh, this is the end. Okay, so that is the only time that I consider carrying these smaller calibers and smaller handguns. But in these cases, I would, because it is better than nothing. It's better than a sharp stick. It's better than a stapler. Okay, and getting home, if you have to fight, means you fight like an animal. You fight with everything you've got, and you are determined to get home. And if you can help other people along the way, that's always good too. Always good. Okay. I'll leave it there. These things, as you can see, do happen. And it goes into what I always say: anything can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. This happened in a very smallish city of 37,000 people, Lewiston, Maine. And he was from a very small town of 3,000 people. So it's not like, well, you got to go to the big city to be in danger. No, these things are happening everywhere now. And with him, it was a mental health issue. And in most of these cases, it's a mental health issue. But when a mental health issue has a gun, it makes it dangerous, right? Again, it's not the gun, it's the person. So anyway, I hope this has helped a little bit. Like I say, I'll be putting up in the next couple of weeks something about if you're kind of new to guns, I'll be putting up and I'll show you a whole bunch of my handguns and explain to you why you might consider this and that and the other thing. I do teach shooting and handgun to a very select group. So I'll share that on here within the next couple of weeks. But remember, you are the one who is responsible for your safety and security, and you are the one who's responsible for getting yourself home to your wife, your husband, your kids, your dog, whatever, and you have to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So remember, we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. Prepare well by making sure that you have what you need to defend yourself. And then play some mental scenarios. What would you do in different situations? Wherever you go, work, the grocery store, a restaurant, whatever. Okay, you all have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.